A Long Night Chapter 1. It was late at night, maybe 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, but Sonic could not find rest. He was swirling around in his racer bed, growing impatient. After a long day filled with fun for the little hedgehog, he had passed out on the couch between his two favorite people in the whole world. It was Maddie's turn to pick a movie for the night, and she had chosen an old favorite, Holiday in Rome, starring Audrey Hepburn. The movie, as you can imagine, didn't really appeal to the two boys, but they had settled down since it was Maddie's turn. It was a chilly night in Green Hills, and Sonic had squeezed himself between Tom and Maddie with a large fluffy blanket cocooning the three of them. The couch was large enough for the three of them to sit comfortably in since Sonic was not bigger than 25 feet. Tom had his left hand hugging his family while Maddie had the blue hedgehog close to her. 20 minutes in the movie, the blue alien started feeling the effects of the long day crushing on him. He fought to keep his eyes open, but, as usual, he was sleeping soundly within minutes. Maddie noticed the child was incredibly still for someone as hyperactive as Sonic. She checked and saw he was already in dreamland, not even half through the movie, something that has been happening every day all these months since they took him in.
And he is out.
Maddie carefully whispered, so as not to disturb the child. Tom was so engrossed in the movie he hadn't noticed the alien going slack in their arms. However, when he heard Maddie, he turned his head to face Sonic, even though he couldn't see him fully since his face was half pressed in Maddie's arms. Tom carefully stroked his head with his right hand, and looked up at Maddie, who was in turn watching their child with love in her eyes. They made eye contact and smiled at each other, then turned their eyes back to the film playing on television, mentally agreeing that they were going to let the blue blur sleep a little longer between them until the movie ended and they carried him to his room. After the film's credits rolled, Tom closed the television with the controller. He looked at Maddie, who was already sheepishly looking at him, half asleep. Then he looked at his newly adopted child that he had grown to love deeply those 6 months.
I'll rip to bed with you, little speedster,
Tom said, and with the help of Maddie, he carefully maneuvered the child in his arms, who was still dead to the world.
I'm going to get ready for bed,
Maddie said as she stretched, having already stood up from their little nest in the couch.
I'm getting him tucked in bed and coming in food,
Tom whispered, with the head of the hedgehog placed on his shoulder, while the older man's hands were carrying him and one of which was stroking the fur on the child's back. He made his way to the attic, where the youngster's room was placed. As usual, the room was a mess. Toys on the floor, boxes opened here and there, weird a variety of things scattered around, but with the fairy lights Maddie had so carefully placed on the wall, illuminating the room, giving a very familiar and homey feeling. Tom shook his face lightly, a smile plastered on his face with the kid's antics. He loved him dearly for who he was, along with his messy behavior. Once he reached the red racer car bed, he carefully pulled away the comforter and placed the still sleeping child on the bed. He made sure all lamps were inside the mattress, and then he tucked the sheets and comforter up until it reached the hedgehog's chin. He took a moment of silence to watch the speedster in this rare calm state. It was a huge contradiction to the normal Sonic, who was running around and talking all seconds of the day. He was a handful, Tom agreed in his mind, but he still couldn't bear not being around him for more than a day. With a quick but loving stroke to the child's cheek, he made his way downstairs and to his own bed to sleep beside his tired and probably already sleeping wife. Back to now, though. The previously calm and asleep hedgehog was having a difficult time. He was sleeping mindlessly until he suddenly woke up. One look around, he realized he was in his bed and guessed that probably Tom or Maddie carried him once again upstairs. He didn't understand why he had so suddenly woke up. He tried to remember if he had seen a dream, but he couldn't remember anything specific. However, he started feeling a dull pain in his stomach area and finally understood. Maybe the dinner Tom had cooked today didn't agree with him. He tried to forget the feeling and turned around in the bed, tucking himself again with the sheets, thinking he could resume his sleep. The pain did not decline and instead increased by the hour. He turned in his bed when a sudden sharp pain in his abdomen made him freeze, while a small whine of shock and pain escaped his lips. When the pain ceased, he carefully curled into himself, not fully becoming a ball, and hoped the pain would finally go away. The pain did not stop even when the alien stayed in his embryo position. It grew and grew until the once sharp pain became constant. He couldn't understand what was happening. He was scared and he wanted Tom or Maddie with him, but he was in so much pain he couldn't find the energy to yell for them, though he doubted the pair would hear him being all the way downstairs. Tears slowly started streaming down his face and the waterworks began. Tom was waken up by Ozzy, the family's loyal dog and protector of the house. Ozzy had his face on the mattress and was whining. Tom didn't understand what was happening since the dog was mostly calm during the night and only barked when a cat or something else passed by outside. He figured that he may needed water, and he had finished the bowl of water Tom himself had refilled that morning. He looked outside the window and saw that it was still very late and he couldn't see any trace of light from outside. A look at Maddie made him realize that his wife was so deep in her slumber that she had heard the demanding dog by the end of the bed. Tom guessed he was the lucky one of the night, and with a silent grunt he stood himself from the warm bed. Ozzy followed him closely and was getting in the way the whole way to the kitchen, making Tom almost trip in his half-asleep state. He eyed the dog's half-full water bowl and then the dog itself.
You're a very demanding dog, sir.
He filled the bowl full and grumpily made his way to the bedroom, thinking that he was free from the dog and could finally return to his loved bed. He was once again mistaken, since the dog was still not leaving his side. Tom groaned and petted the dog's head.
What do you want, buddy? It's very late for cuddles again,
he said while he continued the petting. In this moment of silence, Tom picked up a weird sound that shouldn't be happening in the middle of the night. He couldn't quite understand what he was hearing, but following the sound he saw it was coming from the attic and his child's room. Finally his instincts started to kick in and he stumbled his way to the stairs going up the attic. He paused for a second, trying to confirm that the sound was coming from the attic so he wouldn't wake up the probably sleeping hedgehog for no reason. When the confirmation was made, he carefully stepped up the ladder and entered the room. It was pitch black in the room, the skylight allowing some moonlight inside, making the room slightly visible. He could make out the bed in the corner of the room, where the young alien should be sleeping at this time of night. However, the sound he now realized was coming from the hedgehog himself altered the thought. The small child had almost formed a ball in the middle of the bed and was slightly shaking. When Tom stepped further inside the room, the mess of the room now forgotten, he understood that the sound he was hearing was probably the alien sobbing, hence the shaking.
Sonic.
He warily asked, not waiting for an answer as he walked towards the bed. Sonic did not respond, but his sobs were now more audible, slightly increasing in volume. Tom, worried and dumbfounded, sat on the side of the bed, Sonic's back facing him. He put his left hand on top of the hedgehog's shoulder and slightly shook him.
Sonic, what is it?
The movement and the voice made Sonic suck in a deep breath and cry even louder. Tom, being impatient and just wanting to know what was going on with his child, grabbed Sonic's shoulders and tried to lay him on the bed so that he could finally see the child's face. The movement made Sonic flinch and start sobbing even harder than before. Tom was now extremely worried about the hedgehog's condition, and a look at the soaking tears and red-eyed face of his son made him realize that Sonic was in pain, either physical or mental, that he had yet figured out.
Buddy, what is it? Why are you crying out?
There was no answer besides the sobs, so Tom asked again.
Did you have a bad dream? Is this why you're crying?
His voice was filled with worry and love for the hedgehog in front of him as he desperately tried to understand what had happened. Sonic still did not form a proper answer and in his sobbing state lifted a hand towards his dad. Tom didn't need any more proof of what Sonic needed with his movement, so he just placed his hands on either side of Sonic's belly to lift him in his arms. The moment the older's hands touched that area, Sonic let out a loud sob, resembling a small scream. Tom had no idea what he had done that made the hedgehog reek like that, but he slowly put together that the pain he guessed the speedster was feeling was physical, and probably a stomachache, figuring from where his hands had touched that made Sonic hurt even more. Immediately, He felt sorry for causing the poor hedgehog more pain, but he still complied and put his hands on Sonic's armpits and slowly lifted him up, knowing that the hedgehog probably wanted to be held. Once he placed the hedgehog on his lap, with his two legs wrapped around his torso, he pulled him as close to him as he could, careful not to disturb the stomach area further.
I'm sorry, Sonic. I didn't want to hurt you, baby. Can you tell me what's wrong so I can fix it? Is your tummy hurting?
After some seconds, the hedgehog slowly nodded with his cheek pressed against Tom's chest, still not forming proper sentences. Tom hummed in understandment and stroked the child's back, trying to soothe him and calm his sobbing.
Alright, honey, it's alright, it's alright. What you're going to do is call Maddie so she can give you the proper medication to ease the pain, alright?
Sonic did not respond, but his sobs slowly died down, feeling secure in the hands of the man he trusted most in the world, his dad.
Maddie.
Tom slowly started to rock from right to left while still sitting on the bed. His mind was racing 100 miles per hour, trying to soothe the crying child in his hands, figure out how this might have started, and try to wake Maddie up without going down so as not to cause more discomfort to the hedgehog.
Maddie.
He yelled even louder, hoping he would be heard from up there. Sonic was relaxing more in his arms, his sobs now just constant sniffling. 2 seconds later, steps could be heard going up the stairs, and 2 seconds after that, a just woken Maddie, in her bed hair and robe around her pajamas, was standing in the room. It took her a few seconds, but when she saw Tom hugging a sniffling Sonic in his arms, she was suddenly wide awake and in alarm as she fastened her pace to the bed.
What is it? What happened?
She asked with concern lacing her voice, her tone growing softer as she moved closer to Tom and put her hand on the sniffling hedgehog.
It's alright, little speedster has to magically probably do you have veterinary or human medicine that could help the poor guy?
Tom answered.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Sonic.
She owed as she stroked his furry back.
I'm gonna go check if I have anything for a stomachachi, and I will be back, but can I take a look at you first?
She said softly, wanting to be as gentle as possible so the little hedgehog would comply. Sonic, still hiding his face in Tom's chest, turned his head towards Maddie, nodded softly, but he still didn't detach himself from his strong embrace on Tom.
Okay, honey, can you sit on the bed beside me so I can examine you properly?
Maddie asked nicely and hoped the hedgehog would be an easy patient this time. Every time Sonic felt vulnerable, he would find either Maddie or Tom and stick to them, or at least around them, until he felt safe again. 10 years of isolation made him starve-touched, and nor Tom or Maddie would complain, giving the hedgehog as much attention as he needed. Her hopes flew out the window when Sonic whined loudly and hit his head against Tom's chest while increasing his hold on the man, not wanting to leave his arms even for a split second. The said man, who was watching the whole ordeal, never stopped his comforting stroking on the child's back and started shushing him when he began whining.
It's alright, Sonic. I'll be right beside you. It's alright.
He made a move to lift the child and place him beside him so that he could help Maddie out, but the hedgehog started crying again and held on to Tom even harder than before. Maddie tried to help as well, but with no success.
No.
Tom hugged him closely again and returned to stroking his back. He looked at the sad-looking Maddie, who was feeling bad for the ill hedgehog. She looked at him and then returned her gaze to the crying blue hedgehog in her husband's arms.
It's okay, Sonic. Don't cry, baby. Will you at least let me examine you while sitting with Tom?
Alright.
Said Sonic, returning to sadly sniffling in Tom's arms.
Alright, Tom, can you put him a little further away so I can check his stomach?
Tom pulled Sonic slightly away from him, with his hands still hugging the blue blur. Fortunately, there was no fight this time, which both Maddie and Tom were grateful for. Maddie put her one hand on Sonic's back, and with the other she slowly rubbed the hedgehog's belly. Indeed, Sonic's belly was swollen and felt hot to the touch. This led to Maddie putting her hand on Sonic's forehead and testing for a fever. After she felt that Sonic had a lightly higher temperature than usual, she gave one last pat to Sonic's back and rushed downstairs. Tom didn't move from his place as he rocked the tired and sniffling child in his arms, becoming even more worried of his condition. Luckily, Maddie was back in 3 minutes with her medical kit in hand. She sat back down beside Tom and pulled out a thermometer. When she wrapped a new plastic cover around the edge, she faced the trembling hedgehog in front of her.
Sonic, darling, can you face me, please?
She said as softly as possible with her motherly tone. Sonic slowly turned his head from where he was swishing it in Tom's chest to face her.
Okay, this is a thermometer, and when I put it in your mouth, it's gonna tell us your temperature, okay, baby?
Sonic looked skeptical of the new contraption held in front of him, but he just wanted all this to be over with. He shyly opened his mouth and looked at Maddie. Maddie placed the thermometer under Sonic's tongue, but when she pressed his mouth closed, the hedgehog started gagging and the thermometer fell out.
Sonic, it's okay. Are you alright?
Maddie came to the rescue.
I'm sorry I didn't warn you, but this has to be under your tongue to work, honey.
Maddie apologized. Sonic still looked too much out of it, like he was fighting another gag.
Do you feel nauseous? Do you feel like throwing up?
Tom interjected, noticing how Sonic had stiffened in his arms and was struggling with his breath. Sonic nodded his head, looking down with tears forming once again in his eyes. He was so tired. He wanted all this to be gone and to lay down and sleep peacefully. He had never felt more sick in his life, and the pain he felt was so strong and anguishing.
Maybe the dinner messed with his stomach.
Tom looked up at Maddie and tried to shed light to the situation.
I don't think that mac and cheese could make him sick unless he was lactose intolerant, which we know he isn't.
Maddie responded, always in her doctor's mind.
And also his fast metabolism should have already digested the food. No, this is something else. I will do a few more tests.
She finished her thoughts. Sonic had once again tiredly buried his head on Tom's shoulders and was exhausted. She digged out an armpit thermometer and placed it in Sonic's right armpit, holding his arm tightly for him. After a few minutes, it beat a fever of 100 degrees. Maddie put belly swelling, nausea and fever on her mental list and continued investigating. She had a list of things that could be going on and was crossing out illnesses that didn't match. She moved her hand back on Sonic's belly and started from the top. She gently pushed around, eyeing the hedgehog closely for a reaction. However, when she pushed the area of Sonic's lower right belly, the poor hedgehog screamed in agony and pain and started sobbing again as he pressed himself fully onto Tom. Maddie immediately removed her hands and started consoling the sobbing hedgehog along with a frightened Tom.
It's okay. I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. I'm done now, see? It's okay, honey.
She said as she placed everything back in her bag and started stroking Sonic's form. Tom started shushing the crying child and hugged him strongly while rubbing circles on his back. Then he looked back at Maddie with worry radiating off of him. She looked him worryingly back and started explaining what she had gathered.
Well, I think he has appendicitis. The strong pain in his belly and the rest of his symptoms indicate that, and also he is in an age where he is most likely to get it.
So what do we do now? Do we call for an ambulance? Him to the hospital or give him something? I've never had appendicitis as a child and I know absolutely nothing about it. Pick that Timmy from high school got it once and he was away from school for 2 weeks.
He said fast and worryingly.
Okay, firstly relax. It is common in children his age, but I guess I didn't expect it with the whole alien thing. However, from what I know, we have to take him to the hospital where they are going to have a quick surgery and remove it.
At the mention of surgery, the almost asleep hedgehog looked up at Maddie, and neither her loving stare or Tom's petting could calm him down.
No, I don't want it.
He whined as tears started forming in his eyes.
No, Sonic, it's really not that bad. It happens to a lot of children every year and it's a routine surgery. It won't take more than 2 to 3 days, I promise.
Maddie tried to console the scared child, but Sonic had none of it. He would not let anyone touch him. He didn't want to go there. Why couldn't he just stay home like when he was congested? He was scared, worried, in pain, and terribly exhausted, and he did what every child would do when in this situation. He started sobbing hard, harder than before, and no one could be angry at him. It had been a long night for the three of them, and it wasn't even 5:30 yet. Tom looked at Maddie and she shook her head.
I'm sorry, Sonic, but this can be very dangerous if we don't get it removed immediately, and we really need to go now so we can avoid any dangers. Okay, sweetheart.
Sonic was in no state of answering. He was bailing his eyes out and mumbled no over and over again. The couple looked at each other, and with a wave of Maddie's head, Tom was up from the bed. Maddie took a cover blanket from atop of the bed, carefully tucked it around the now defeated hedgehog, listlessly hugging Tom while still crying. When Sonic realized they were moving, he started crying harder again, but he was so exhausted and in pain he didn't fight in Tom's arms. They walked to the door and Maddie put on her coat. She looked at Tom, expecting him to put on his own coat, but with his hands full of a certain little hedgehog he couldn't.
No, fine, he'll put in the heat once we get in the car.
Tom said and walked out. Maddie took both Tom's and Sonic's jackets and thought she would have to bring more stuff in a bag if this was actually what she figured it was. She really hoped it wasn't, but her doctor experience, even as a veterinarian, told her otherwise. She hoped on the driver's seat, since Tom had already settled in the back seat with what seemed like an asleep hedgehog that let out some sniffles here and there. When they made it to the hospital, it was still 5:45. Early in the morning, and no one was outside or inside the hospital. Since they had a hospital in Green Hills, they didn't have to drive long and also didn't have to worry about exposing Sonic to an outsider, since everyone in Green Hills knew and adored him. They walked inside with the semi-conscious child still in Tom's arms. A nurse told them to go sit in the emergency room chairs and wait a few minutes till the doctor arrived. They sat next to each other and waited patiently. In the meantime, Sonic, who was now much calmer since his little nap, finally popped his face out of Tom's hold and looked around. The couple looked at the hedgehog's face, now clearly visible in the hospital's bright lights, and felt their hearts break. The usually happy and chatty face was gone, and his face had taken a sad and tired hedgehog, with red eyes from crying and face in a constant scrunch from the unstoppable pain. His eyes seemed kind of glazed from the fever, and he looked much older than the child who took on Robotnik. Sonic was really not looking good, and both Maddie and Tom felt so sorry for their little blur of trouble. The speedster looked at Maddie on his right and then Tom and wiped his tears. He rested his tired head on Tom's chest again.
I don't like clean walls.
He whispered, his voice hoarse and tinny from the constant crying. The comment made the pair laugh and relax a little, knowing that Sonic was on his normal antics once again and not the miserable hedgehog they had to deal with a few hours ago. He still looked terrible and was in pain, but his humor was back strong, and that encouraged the pair.
Yeah, but imagine how funny it would be if it had posters on it.
Tom added, wanting to see the kid laugh. A small grin made its way on Sonic's face, and Maddie was resembling his reaction while looking at Tom with a sheepish grin.
But it was just a suggestion.
The man added. At that moment, a doctor passed by them and asked them kindly to come inside. The relaxed moment was ruined, but at least Sonic was willing to show his face to the world this time. Once they sat inside, Sonic still in Tom's arms, the doctor addressed them.
Hey, Maddie, I demand. Hello there, Sonic. What brings you here at this time of day?
Hello, Dr. Shum. Sonic was not feeling so well, and after Maddie examined him, we got here to get a look yourself.
So what seems to be the problem?
The doctor looked at Sonic, but Maddie answered for him, knowing the hedgehog wouldn't want to talk right now.
Well, he had immense belly itchy in the lower right side, a light fever, nausea, and some swelling on his belly. And because he is between the ages of high risk of appendicitis, I figured this might be the case.
Okay, let's amend him so we know what we are dealing with. Sonic, will you come to the examining table, please?
Sonic, who was previously looking at the doctor, turned his face at him and looked down. He knew he could avoid the doctor and the pain was getting bigger, so he just wanted to finally get rid of it. He nodded his head slowly after a few minutes of silence, and the doctor stood up from his chair. Tom carefully placed the hedgehog on the ground and stood up himself, not wanting to let the unsure hedgehog alone. The doctor made his way to the weighing scale and instructed Sonic to step on it. After that, the doctor asked Tom to lift the kid on the examining table. Tom lifted him on the table and stood beside him, holding his hand for support. The doctor placed a stethoscope on the hedgehog's chest and instructed him to take in big breaths and slowly exhale.
Well, that's what the heart rate I'm hearing there. Maddie, I assume you have examined him before. Tell me things I should know about his physical view.
The doctor hummed in confirmation and continued the examination. He measured his temperature, using an armpit thermometer to avoid other mistakes, took his pressure, checked his throat and ears, then started examining his belly. In the beginning, he examined the left side and asked whether it was hurting. However, the more he reached the right side, the hedgehog stiffened his hold on Tom's palm. The pain was strong, and he couldn't help but feel new tears forming in his eyes. After some poking here and there, the doctor finally hit the spot that hurt the alien the most, and the poor child let out a low yell while tears started traveling down his face. The doctor continued more carefully this time, but the pain was still huge and Sonic couldn't help but flinch and try to turn to Tom for help. Tom tried to reassure him, but the child was sobbing once again, asking for his dad. The doctor finished the examination and removed his gloves.
Okay, now I'm sorry, we're done.
Dr. Sean apologizingly said and returned to the chair behind his office. Tom took the whimpering child back in his arms and started shushing him and rocking him, trying to ease the pain the kid was experiencing. He sat back down on the chair, and Maddie quickly wrapped the blanket around the child again and stroked his back lovingly.
From what I can see, Sonic indeed probably has appendicitis, but we'll need a scan to be sure. Maddie, as you probably know, well, if it really is appendicitis, we'll have to remove it with a quick run of antibiotics and small operation. It is actually trivial, but it can be extremely dangerous if left untreated. I don't believe the inflamed appendix has erupted since he isn't in agonizing pain, but we don't want that from happening, so we just got to be careful. The hospital is mostly empty, so it should take between 15 to 20 minutes to have the CT ready for you guys, so you can wait outside until a nurse comes and takes you there. After the CT is ready, I'll take a look at it myself and I'll talk to you again later, okay?
All right, thank you very much, Sean.
Tom replied.
My pleasure, guys.
Tom and Maddie sat outside again, on the chairs that grew even more uncomfortable by the second. The pair looked at each other and then at the hedgehog that had finally fallen asleep in Tom's arms from the exhaustion and pain of the long night. Tom was grateful. At least when he was asleep, he wouldn't be in pain and would calm down a bit.
How did we not see this coming? How did we miss the signals?
Maddie, we can't blame ourselves. Sonic is a very hyperactive child that never tells us when he feels sick.
Yes, but he didn't finish his plate during dinner, which is extremely unusual for his metabolism, and then he fell asleep quite early today. I, at least, should have seen it.
Maddie can't know everything. Yes, he did some things differently today, but that is how children are. He would never tell us even if he felt bad, and anyway, it hadn't happened, and now all we can do is help him get over this and be by his side, all right? And,
You are right.
She sighed and kissed his cheek and the sleeping hedgehog's face. After 20 minutes, the couple, exhausted themselves, were hardly keeping their eyes open, but they knew they couldn't sleep soundly like the still sleeping hedgehog, since the nurse was about to call them. And in fact, the moment Tom made that thought, a nurse came, asked their names, and asked them to follow her. A small stroll through the hospital later, and they finally made it to the CT room. The room was not the ordinary room for taking the scan, but was rather painted in bright colors and pictures with the theme of space. The kids' CT room was perfect for Sonic's size and needs. The nurse said that they had to put a hospital gown on the hedgehog as part of the protocol, but also to protect him from other bacteria and viruses traveling the hospital. A gown to fit Sonic's size was a children's gown with some sort of animals painted on it. However, the child was still passed out in Tom's arms with no intent of waking up anytime soon. Not wanting to wake the exhausted kid up, Tom laid Sonic to a chair and, with the help of Maddie, placed the gown on the sleeping hedgehog. Tom picked him back up and Maddie did the straps from.
Okay, so could you just place him here so we can begin the scan?
Tom placed Sonic on the machine carefully as to not wake him up.
Can someone stay in here in case he wakes up?
Maddie asked.
No, unfortunately, only infants are allowed to have their parents or some worker in here to calm them down, but seeing how Sonic is still sleeping, I wouldn't worry so much about him waking. The machine is designated for small children, so it makes minimum sound.
Tom and Maddie took a last look at their child and left the room along with the nurse. She guided them to the control room where they could still see Sonic.
Even if he does wake up, we have microphones so that you can speak to him while still being in here.
The nurse reassured the worried parents. Tom took Maddie's hand and observed how the process was done. And indeed, true to the nurse's words, Sonic didn't ever stir while being there. When they were free to go back inside, Maddie picked him up and rested his face on the crook of her neck while Tom carried the coats outside. They sat in comfortable silence, once again next to each other, and watched Sonic sleep while they waited for the results.